you've talked about the Stoic workout before. I'm very interested in your perspective here, but yeah, tell us about your experience with fitness.
Sure. And I've dabbled in different fitness things, running, and I've done the Highland Games, the Scottish heavy events, tossing of the
No
caber.
way. That's awesome.
Yeah, I've done 10-man tug of war teams, a little bit of bodybuilding, Olympic style weightlifting, powerlifting.
Yeah.
But my main interest was always in the strength sports. And I work out right now, actually, I must admit, I'm retired. I work out 6 days a week now in these brief, and focused workouts. But when I was, how old was I? I mean, I was in kindergarten. I was mesmerized by Superman, the old black and white TV show. Superman, I thought, wow, I just love that physical prowess. This idea of this guy, who's built up his body, and yet, I'm here in the United States of America. His motto was, it's all for truth, justice, and the American way, right? So he has all this power, but he's not using it to dominate people, right? He's using it to do good things. Well, so as a little kid, I actually wanted to be Superman, but as I got a little bit older, I realized that wasn't going to work. But at about second grade, I saw an Olympic weightlifter on television. I thought, okay, now that is a real human being. That's what I want to do. So I demanded that my dad get me my first weight set from, I think I was just in second grade still. And by the time I was in about seventh grade, 12 years old or so, I started working out regularly, and I have now for 45 years or something now, over that, I guess.
That's awesome.
But I've always been a fan of fitness. So, in my late teens, I discovered the Stoics and started, reading them off and on, Seneca, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius. So whenever they talked about something related to fitness, I kind of perked, okay, I'm going to underline that. I'm going to make a mental note of that. So it occurred to me later on, after I'd written one of my first, I think it was after my second book, I wanted to write a book about kind of the old Greco-Roman idea of a healthy mind and a healthy body. Then I was actually asked by a Catholic publisher to do a book on that topic, but showing like the Catholic approach to the body and physical fitness. I said, sure, I'll do that. But in doing that, I still incorporated a lot of those Stoic insights I came across. And let me just give you just real briefly a few examples, and you can decide if you want to dig deeper in any of these. Well, a Stoic I discovered years later was Musonius Rufus. His writings aren't as extensive, and the translations weren't as common. But he compares virtues to proper training of the body, disciplining your body so you have control over it. There's also a sense where, even though the Stoics want to pursue virtue as the highest good, we also have roles and duties. It's going to be harder to fulfill those if we're sickly, or laid up in bed, though we can handle it if that happens to us, but it's not going to be our desire. So even as living the philosophical life, there's something to be said about taking care of your body. But I found the most explicit references to this kind of thing in Seneca and in Epictetus. I'll start with one from Seneca, because the system of training I've done the most over the years is something they call HIIT, or high intensity training. It's basically where you do some very intense, heavy exercises, but pretty briefly, limited amount of time. You don't necessarily repeat it very often. So it's kind of like you're trying to get the biggest bang from your buck, investing a little bit of time and getting maximum results. Well, Seneca even has a line where he talks about taking care of the body. He says, it's good. We should take care of our bodies. And he said exercised every day. He walked and did other things. But he said also there are certain specific exercises that are brief and efficient, that you can wear yourself out in a short period of time and then go on back to the more important things of virtue in your soul. So I thought, man, that kind of has some parallels with the idea behind the high intensity training. You're not going to spend all day on it. You're going to try to do something that's efficient. You can spend a little bit of focused time and get a result there. So I see his commonalities in that concept with the high intensity training. But Epictetus, he talks about fitness in several different places. And one of my favorites, being a weightlifter, he references Milo of Crotona, this ancient Greek, and he's considered the father of weightlifting. He's this guy that the fable says he lifted a calf every day when he was young. As the calf got bigger, Milo kept lifting, so he gets bigger and bigger, until he eventually becomes the greatest Olympic wrestling champion ever. For like 2 decades or something, he was undefeated. And he's such an interesting guy. Aristotle references him. Thomas Aquinas does years later. But Epictetus does too. And Epictetus says this. He says, just because I can't be a Milo, the very most strongest man in the world, he goes, it doesn't mean I won't take care of my body. He says, just because I can't be the best in any field doesn't mean I won't be the best that I can be. So here Epictetus has this idea that we shouldn't become absorbed in our bodies, and most of us are never going to be the best in any particular physical activity or sport, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't take care of ourselves. And then in one other section there, and he talks about it in multiple sections, but one other of my favorites, he says, if you're training basically for a marathon, there's a certain way you're going to train. If you're training for the pentathlon, these 5 events that involve more strength, you're going to have a different way of training. So basically, your training in life needs to match what your activity is going to be. Oh, yeah, and in one example, he even contrasts a long-distance runner to a sprinter. And later, the people that talked about HIIT training, the high-intensity strength training, used that very same distinction. They said if you look at the body of a marathon runner whose goal is endurance, it's going to look very different from the body of a sprinter whose goal is brief, intense spurts of activity. The sprinter typically is more heavily muscle because that's what he needs, that explosive power. So the modern HIIT people say, well, your strength training, if your goal is to develop stronger, bigger muscle, should be more like the training of a sprinter than that of a long distance runner. So there's all kinds of these little gems there in the Stoics where you're thinking, wow, I mean, they understood a lot even back then. And I'm sorry, Simon, I got to go on one other thing. When I did that Stoic work, I titled it "Show Me Your Shoulders," and that was a direct quote from Epictetus. And here's what he meant by that. He said, if I go up to an athlete, and say, show me what you can do. Show me that you're an athlete. And they show me their equipment, their throwing weights or something. Epictetus says, go hang. I don't want to see your equipment. He says, show me your shoulders. In other words, he's saying, show me the results of your activity. Have they built you up? Have they made you stronger, faster, more enduring? So again, I love that stoical common sense view that if you're going to devote time to training in any field, you should really, monitor yourself and see, is it really achieving the goal that I'm after?